Good evening. My name is Liz Danzico. I am the chair and the co-founder of a graduate program in interaction design here at SVA. I'm also the creative director for National Public Radio, NPR in DC, and I'm here to welcome you all this evening. Thank you for coming. On behalf of all of us, we want to thank our guests this evening, the SVA Theater, the theater we're sitting in here, the School of Visual Arts at Large, SVA's Career Development Office, Angie Wojak, and Anna Oger-Bloomer from the Career Development Office, Director and Assistant Director, Stacy Miller, faculty at Parsons, and all of you for helping bring this conversation together. Thank you so much. So I'm just going to give you a bit of background before we dive in. There are many ways to get to the same place. Building a career that has impact and meaning is rarely a straight line, but rather a circuitous, somewhat confusing path, or at least for me it is. Even if you share the same title or the same company or the same mission as the person sitting right next to you or across from you, you probably followed very different paths to get there. So I think, particularly now, we're all trying to make sense of our role as we move from one part of our life to the next, all the while trying to do work that matters, to be a person that matters. And no matter how we try to plan, it always ends up being somewhat, a combination of, talent, will, and this sort of magnetic force of luck that brings us to the place that we want to go. So likewise, building a meaningful friendship takes work. It is work. No matter how independent, how autonomous you are, there are quiet forces all around you who are supporting us, seeing us, witnessing us, being there for us. And alongside of us, there are people who inspire, who guide and mentor, and who are champions and skeptics of all the things that we do. And most of all, they have wildly different viewpoints who really shape who we are. These are the people who listen, and even if you just have one of those people, they're the people who witness us without agenda. These people are called friends. This evening, these are the subjects we'll tackle: career and friendships. And we've brought together two people who've not only changed the course of the visual, textual, verbal, cultural, and political forces all around us, but who have they themselves traveled serendipitous paths to get there as friends. And we are going to ask them about that, and whether or not they can trace that path, we shall see. But before we get started, there are a few notes. This talk is being recorded, so just keep that in mind. There will be a Q&A later, so just keep that in mind when you're asking questions. We have an audience viewing from the live stream, so hello, remote audience. And just a quick reminder to silence your phones if you have them with you. So I'm so honored to be able to try to introduce these remarkable women. In the center on stage, Angie Wojak, this evening's moderator, who originally conceived of this whole idea. She's the director of career development at SVA, and she specializes in developing relationships between employers and internships across a different number of fields, from film to animation and media. She has over 2 decades of experience doing this in higher education, where she's worked not only at SVA, but also doing a similar thing at Columbia University and Parsons. And she's also the author of a couple of books on these subjects and lectured widely and designed programs like this widely. Tonight she'll be our conversation guide. So to her right and your left, Barbara Nessim, an illustrator, educator, artist, original human in her thinking, and unprecedented in her creativity, which we'll find out more about this evening. She navigated the male-dominated business and advertising world in the 1960s with great audacity. Her first big illustration job was at Doubleday doing book design. And when she began her academic career here at SVA, actually, in 1967, she was the second woman, because there was only one other, who had joined the faculty at that time, until she joined Parsons as the head of the illustration department years later. In the 80s, she pioneered computer generated graphics, which was at the time something that no one knew anything about. And she was right there trying to develop new ideas and push the boundaries of what art could mean. Although at that time and still today, we understand that she uses her sketchbook to generate new ideas. So her illustrations, some of which you've been seeing on the screen, have appeared in the New York Times and Rolling Stone, and her artwork in installations from museums and galleries ranging from the Smithsonian to the Louvre. Stephen Heller, who's the co-chair of one of the programs here, MFA Design, alongside Lita Tallarico, has said of Barbara, Nessim entered the men's club of illustration by walking right through the front door. And that is what we're hoping to learn more about tonight. Barbara is a New Yorker and Gloria's friend of more than 60 years. So to Angie's, well, did I let the secret out? Okay, to Angie's left is Gloria. Gloria Steinem is a writer, speaker, activist, and feminist organizer. Gloria arrived in New York in the 60s as well to make her mark as a writer and a journalist. And at that time, as you might expect, there were few women in the field and even fewer covering politics. So from what we understand, she invented her own career to a certain extent, writing with a political beat, with no boss, I understand as a point of pride, eventually helping to found New York Magazine and Miss Magazine. She has been a champion for women using her powers of listening to cause change in the world by hearing people. She's been causing change for all kinds of women who have been treated unfairly simply because they're women. Her work has transformed this conversation in the world today. So 5 decades after she has started sort of trying to have equality for all voices, she is still continuing to push forward with new projects. Today she's advisor for Time's Up. She's written the recent bestseller, My Life on the Road, among several other books. And just recently, she produced a documentary on child abuse for HBO, a feature film about the death penalty for Lifetime, a series of documentaries about violence against women, I believe for Vice, and currently is exploring some key themes in an off-Broadway play that we'll talk about later. So after decades of being under the public microscope, which is a phrase she herself used to describe First Lady Michelle Obama, she's managed to do what no one else has done, be creative, inventive, and meaningful in new and unexpected and relevant ways day after day after day after day. Speaking of Michelle Obama, President Barack Obama, who in 2013 awarded her the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which, as you probably know, is the highest honor a civilian can receive, said, said this about her, which I just felt was quite beautiful. Because of her work across America and around the world, more women are afforded the respect and opportunities that they deserve, but she's also changed how women thought about themselves. Gloria continues to pour her heart into teaching and mentoring. Her one piece of advice to young girls is, do not listen to my advice. Listen to the voice inside you and follow that. So Gloria is too a New Yorker and Barbara's friend of more than 60 years, and that is only the beginning. Gloria, Barbara, and Angie, welcome to the SVA Theater, and all please give a proper welcome to Gloria Steinem and Barbara Nessim, joined by Angie here on stage.
So welcome.
Thank you.
I love to recount to everyone the story about how you started your careers and met in the early 60s. Gloria, you were starting your career as a writer, and you were starting your career, Barbara, as a freelance illustrator. Mm-hmm. And I understand that you met kind of through a double date, through guys you were dating, right?
We did.
And you hit it off, forgot about the guys, and became roommates. And they became roommates for, I think, 6 years. And from those 6 years of living together, your friendship has continued all these years. And I'd like to start the conversation by quoting something that Gloria wrote for as an essay for Barbara's book, An Artful Life. You said, we had an odd kind of security. As long as we didn't know what was going to happen the next day or the next month, it could be great. If this seemed just the reverse of the usual security of knowing, it nonetheless worked for us. A large part of the reason was that we had each other as examples. And I would love to use that as a jumping off point and ask you, Gloria, to talk a little bit about how Barbara was an example for you of a different way to live and be independent.
Mm-hmm. Well, since in some ways, I mean, you've actually had a job a little bit. I've never had a job, but we were both freelancing, and I didn't know anybody else who was. And Barbara was so courageous and full of energy, and going dancing at the same time, and it was just wonderful. And also, it's wonderful to live with her because she arranges everything, even if it doesn't make sense. I would come home. We had a one-room studio, and I would come home, and on the mantle were all things that were silver, a bavo can, candlesticks, it didn't matter, and they looked great, right. So she enriched my living life, my visual life, my sense of adventure. And when you were saying, I was just trying to remember, the truth of the matter is it's either age or otherwise significant that we don't remember the guys we were out with. But here we are.
Yeah. That's great. And Barbara, did you realize when you first met how fiercely independent you both were, and what role did that play?
I never realized I was independent. I mean, I knew what I wanted. I knew what I didn't want, mostly. I didn't want to get married. I didn't want to move to the suburbs. I didn't want a job. I just wanted to live my life and be able to make a living and to be able to be me. And if I could do that, then every day was successful. And the more I could be independent, the more my life was good. And I was happy. And when Gloria and I met, I remember who we were with.
Oh, yeah. That's because she's younger than me.
Just a wee bit. But Benton, and I was with Henry Wolf, and you were with Bob Benton. And
both
they were
art
best
directors.
Friends.
Right.
Yeah.
They were best friends,
Right.
and we ended up talking to each other all the time at dinner. And when I lost my roommate,
And I
needed
couldn't
a
afford
roommate.
the apartment I was in, so I moved in. Right.
So Gloria said, "Can I live with you?" I said, "Yes, but there's two things you have to know about me. I love to stay up late, and I'm a teeny bit messy. No problem."
I outdid her in both departments.
That's amazing. And you had some other roommates come and go just here and there. Like, did Allie McGraw?
What?
Allie McGraw?
Yeah. Oh, she snuck in.
Yeah.
Allie and I were friends because she was working for a photographer, and I knew a lot of art directors and who used photographers. So we met, and our birthdays are one day apart. So we kind of were really fast friends right away. And when she needed a place to live, we welcomed her into our apartment until she found her own apartment. But the three of us lived together
until, I mean, she was living with some guy that didn't work out, so. And I always thought, why are these guys not worthy of you? Why are you bleaching their blue jeans in the bathtub? So we were. But she was great to live with too, because she's so, if you've ever seen Allie McGraw, I mean, it's like having the world's biggest, most beautiful cat. No matter what she does, she looks beautiful.
And I've loved, sometimes I've read some things about you being concerned about Barbara because she would be out dancing, and you were wondering like if she was getting her work done. So.
No, no, she's work obsessed. I mean, I didn't really worry about that. It was just that, and it's great that Barbara loves to dance and is dancing all the time. It's just that I have this memory, which you can object to if you're not friends, that Barbara would be there with her easel and everything was going fine and so on, and the messenger guy, who was some great-looking young Puerto Rican guy, would come in with his radio, and so Barbara would go off dancing.
Listen, they know how to dance. I know it's good. You have to go with the dancers. And I love the music anyway.
Yeah. Barbara, I wanted to talk about, we were just alluding to how she would reorganize the space and make things artistic. And Barbara, you've described in the past that what really works for you is to combine both your professional environment and your personal life and your gardening and your cooking and your family. And I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to how that environment works for you.
Okay, well, first of all, I don't cook.
Okay, so we'll take that off the list.
I managed to find somebody who cooks.
Okay, good.
And I feel very fortunate about that and very lucky. Gardening, I like my plants, orchids, and what was the other thing?
Let's see, family relationships, gardening, personal, writing, all in one place.
I just feel like it all kind of comes together. I think life is an art, and the way you live your life is artful. And that's what makes me happy, and I hope that everybody feels the same way about their lives, because everybody has a great life, and there's only one of you, and there's only one of me, and only one of Gloria, and you live your life the best way you can.
No, actually, Milton Glaser, our Milton Glaser, used to give students a project. I don't know if he ever still does this, which is to design a day from morning till night in your life 5 years hence.
Ooh.
And 5 years gives you a chance to dream of whatever it might be. But it was always interesting to me that he said, because it was a magazine course, so he had writers and visual people both, that the writers, the visual artists always designed a day in which they worked, and the writers all designed a day in which they just finished.
I like that, yeah.
And I think that says something, and I was always kind of envious of that, because I think that visual artists enjoy the process more than us.
Yeah. Great. Let's see. So as we go through our talk, I'm going to be sharing a few more images of Barbara's studio and Gloria's work. And I just thought this was a great image to share. This is an earlier studio of yours, Barbara, an illustration from your work. Something I wanted to bring up right now is I love that in talking about your work in the past, you've talked about how people had trouble understanding what you were doing for a job because it wasn't in the context of a relationship to a man. And you also didn't necessarily have any role models to show you, male or female, how to make a living as an illustrator. So I wonder if you can speak just a little bit about carving that career path out.
Well, I knew that what I didn't want, as I said before. So I thought, I didn't know that there weren't that many women illustrators. I just knew what I wanted to do. And I think that going out with my portfolio every single day, I was living in the Bronx, getting on the subway, 9 o'clock, I had my first appointment, and I would see a lot of different art directors, and then I would come home and if I was lucky enough to get a job, and I didn't get a job right away. Well, I did actually. I sent out some mailers, and somebody called me up from Doubleday, and I did my first job. So I was lucky that way. And I just wanted to make my life on my own terms. And I think that, but I didn't know that I was breaking any ground. And I didn't know that there were very few women illustrators. And when you work at a company and there's lots of people there, you know who is who and how many women there are and how many men there are. But when you're an illustrator just going out and meeting art directors, there weren't that many women art directors either. There was one of my best friends became the first woman art director at Doyle, Dane and Birnbach, probably in 1964, and her name was Sheila Metzner. And she was the first, and that was like a big deal. And that was one of the things that made me understand, hey, there aren't that many women art directors. So it was kind of slowly coming that I realized that there aren't that many women art directors, but I didn't really understand there weren't that many women illustrators.
I'm kind of amazed. Barbara and I've talked about your early career, how you would, you went over to a building and you went floor to floor to floor, knocking on doors with her portfolio. And what I want to talk about next, connected to this, is New York City. So you grew up in New York.
Well, I knew that I needed to have some kind of steady income.
Yeah.
So I decided I'm going to do textile design. I thought that's good. So I went to one building. This way, in the old days, you could go into a building and you go to the top floor, and I knew the garment center, and I went to every single floor, knocked on a door, opened the door, and said, "Does anybody need an artist?" And I got 3 actual jobs in one day, going through maybe 16 floors, and I picked the one that paid me the most, and I designed plaids and stripes 3 days a week for Lori Fabrics, and I just felt like I made $25 a day. I got $75 a week. Perfect. The other 2 days, I took my portfolio out and saw art directors, and I was living, and I was, it was the best thing. So that's what you probably meant, that I had a job. I did in textile design.
I was thinking of SVA, but anyway. That's okay.
Oh, yeah.
But I can do a really good plaid and stripe with pinking shears and my toothbrush.
Your mom was also an artist.
Yeah, my mother was a clothing designer. She designed blouses. And in a building in the Bronx that we lived in, there were 88 apartments, and there were 3 women who worked. My mother was a designer. She went downtown. That was a big deal. There was Marjorie Marshall, who is Penny Marshall, Gary Marshall, Ronnie Marshall's mothers, and she was a dancing school teacher. And then there was Wendy Lipkin's mother, who worked with her husband in real estate, but that was it. Nobody worked. No women worked. And that was something to really realize later on in life.
Yeah, no, that's such a big change. And the phrases, as you say, they used to say, "She goes to business."
Yeah.
Because it was so unusual. Yeah.
She goes what?
She goes to business.
Yeah, right. She got it. Exactly. So.
And you found your way to Pratt. That was where you studied.
Yeah. And my father didn't want me to go to college. He thought if I got too smart, nobody would marry me. Dad, don't worry. I'll get married one day, just not this day. I don't know what day it'll be, but don't worry, I'll get married.
Love it.
But they didn't really pressure me, and that was another thing that was great about my parents. I guess because my mother worked, they didn't really, really breathe down my neck, when are you getting married? Mm-hmm. And I did get married, but I was 41. My parents weren't around anymore, but they saw from up there.
Yeah.
I fulfilled my promise.
That's great. Now, Gloria, you were not from New York, but can you tell us a little bit about how you found your way here and what made you decide to move to New York?
Well, I grew up mostly in Toledo, and then I lived in India for 2 years, which is a whole other story. And I went to college in the East, and somehow in that whole period, New York was just like, I don't know what, freedom, where you wanted to be. The Sunday New York Times itself was an incredible ritual. I came here to visit the UN when I was in college. Our whole class came, and I remember walking through the Broadway area, and there was some little delicatessen, and I went into the delicatessen, and there were 3 showgirls from some local show with complete showgirl, big, headdresses and, kinds of sequins and everything, and they're saying, "Give me a salami on rice," and everybody was just, they weren't even looking at them, it was like completely normal. I said, "Oh, I want to so live here. I want to live here." It just, that you could be whoever you were, right? So I think it's still a magnet, don't you? Right. Yeah. unlike LA, which is a different kind of magnet. But I think this is a magnet for dreams.
Oh, that's great, yeah.
Of all kinds, right?
Yeah, I agree. I know when I was maybe 14 years old, I got on my hands and knees and I prayed to God and I said, "Dear God, thank you so much for having me be born in New York and not in Kansas City." I didn't know what Kansas City was.
That's where I was. Yeah. Well, Missouri.
Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I knew
I was
it.
trying to get to where you were.
I was like only 14. How did I know?
Yeah.
But I knew.
You know, and as I just pulled up a picture, and I'm wondering, I know that you've stayed largely in the same apartment building. Is that correct? Where you and Barbara
Yes,
lived?
Barbara and I moved into it. We were in our studio where we paid like, what, $150 a month?
$162.50.
$160. And then we moved to a floor through in the brownstone where I still in the parlor floor through, which was $300 a month. And we used to get up in the morning and say, where are we going to get $10? And then Barbara, with huge generosity, left so I inherited the apartment, right. And I'm still there. I mean, I never, ever thought that would happen. I mean, I'd never even unpacked my suitcases for most of my life.
And now, before you got here, you mentioned that you were in India for a couple of years, and you've spoken a lot about talking circles, and I wonder if you could tell us just a little bit about how that trip to India and talking circles have affected your
Well,
work.
I went partly because I had grown up a little bit hearing about India because both of my grandmothers were theosophists. You know what that is? Theosophy is kind of a world that leans heavily toward the east anyway. So as a little girl, I was always there in the theosophical meetings with my coloring book, you know, coloring, I don't know, Eastern images. I guess I absorbed it. And also I was engaged when I graduated from college, and I knew I shouldn't get married to this very nice man. Okay. So I had to go very far away, all right. So I went to India, and if you go to India for any amount of time, you are not the same person when you leave as you were. You know, it's huge and diverse. It's like all of Europe. It's 14 different languages. It was just recovering from colonialism, so it was full of energy because it was only a few years past the independence movement. I mean, it was huge. You know, I'm so incredibly grateful. For one thing, I didn't know how the rest of the world lived, or anybody else in the world lived, except the way we do. Right? So it was a great luck and a huge, huge influence.
Great. And Barbara, you've traveled pretty extensively. Has there been any particular effect on your work, your experience traveling?
You know, I don't really love to travel. And I had a friend who we went to school with, and she went everywhere. She goes, "Come on, let's go." And I said, "I don't really care about going anywhere. Everything I want is here in New York. I think New York is the best place to be living." And she would go to Spain for 5 months, and then on a steamer boat. That wasn't interesting for me. But I don't love to travel, even though I do travel places. And if I go someplace, I like to travel for a reason. Like if I give a lecture someplace, and whenever I did travel when I was younger, when I was doing the textile design, I made sure that I made money when I traveled. Like I would go to one of those places in that building, and I would go to them and say, "I'm going to Europe," people that I knew, obviously. "I'm going to Europe, and I'll buy you textiles from Switzerland." And they'd say, "Oh yeah, that's great." And they would give me, you know, we'd negotiate a fee, and then I'd go to another person, we'd negotiate a fee, go to another person. So when I went to Europe, I had a thing to do, like buy textiles, which I liked looking at material anyway, and I paid for my expenses when I traveled. So that was a good way. Traveling and working was always something that attracted me.
And I have never thought, I mean, because exactly as you say, I didn't think of you as a traveler, okay? And I also did not think of her as a techie, okay? So when suddenly she's in Japan teaching them computer art, you know. I was so knocked out, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of which, Barbara, somebody who wanted to be here tonight is Tim Gunn, and he's lecturing elsewhere. But he and I were talking.
Who?
Tim Gunn.
Oh, yeah.
And Tim worked with us when we were at Parsons, and he emphasized to me how important Barbara was to Parsons and to art education as a pioneering educator, because Barbara brought computers into the classroom in Parsons, and they had none.
They had none.
Yeah.
When they asked me to Tim Gunn called me, you know, way before Tim Gunn was Tim Gunn.
Yeah.
And he he didn't know he was going to be Tim Gunn.
Yeah.
And he called me and said, didn't we sent you a letter to take, you know, we have a job that we'd like you to apply for. And I said, oh, I got the letter. He says, well, aren't you going to apply? I said, no. I said, you already know who you're going to hire. I've been in schools before. You send out a lot of letters, you interview a lot of people, and you hire the person who you thought you were going to hire in the beginning. So why do I want to waste my time coming in and interviewing? Oh, no, we don't know who we're going to hire. I said, really? You swear to God? He said, no, we really don't know who we're going to hire. I said, okay, I'll come in. And I came in, and there were like 10 people who were interviewing for the position. I never thought I would get the position. Because I never had a big budget or anything like that. I worked for myself, you know. If I had $2.50 in the bank, I was happy. So basically, came down to two people. One person who was a art director for a big magazine, and I thought, oh, she's definitely going to get the job, and me. So they called me in, and he said, you interviewed very well, and everything was great, and very somber, everybody. And I said, I'm thinking, yeah, I know I didn't get the job. Okay, come on. And goes, and we're here to offer you the job. Silence. And I'm thinking to myself, I got the job. When am I going to do this job? I'm so busy, I don't know when. He said, you want the job, don't you? It's after 9 months of going to all these interviews. And so I said, okay, I will take the job. Yes, I want the job, but I don't know when I'm going to do this job. I'm so busy. So he says, it was a 4-day-a-week job. He said, you can come in 3 days a week. So I thought about it, and I go, okay, maybe thought for 4 days, 3 days, okay, I can do that. 2 days in my studio, 3 days here, no problem. 5 days a week later, I took the job. I was there 5 days a week. Just still did my own work. I don't know how I fit everything in, but it all worked out perfectly. And I said to him, I'm not going to work here unless you're going to buy computers, because you're not going to have an art school unless you buy computers. So they didn't have computers. This was the first year. They didn't have anything. So finally I'm at a party with the president of the school, and I thought, well, I'm going to wait until everybody leaves. And it was just Jonathan Fanton and myself. I said, Barbara, how's it going? I said, oh, Jonathan, not very well. Really? Nobody ever said anything bad news to him. He says, what's the matter? I said, Jonathan, if you're not going to get computers, I've been here a year, you're not going to have an art school. And I don't want to be here if you're not going to have an art school. Now, Parsons, they have 7 schools. Parsons is the school that feeds all the other schools. So without Parsons, those other schools don't exist. So he goes, wait a second, come here. Calls up, Judith, I'm here with Barbara Nessim, and she said, we're not going to have computers. If we don't have computers, we're not going to have an art school. I want you to meet with her. Mm-hmm. So, okay, we have breakfast. So she said, why do you think that we need computers? I said, well, and I had to think of, what could I do to make them understand they need computers? So I went to the New York Times, I got the paper out, and I colored all the ones in red that had computers, and the ones that didn't have computers in green.
Yeah. The want ads.
The want ads, sorry,
Right.
thank you.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And so I she said, okay, why do we need computers? I picked it up and I opened up the thing and I said, if you were going to spend, it was $20,000 then, because it was a long time ago, for college education, on your kid to go to college, would you send them to a school that had computers or not computers where they could get a job? We got computers.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah. I want to bring up an image. I'd love to have this image placed up here together because it's the first issue of a Miss with Wonder Woman, and I feel like your image of Stargirl is so perfect next to it.
Yeah.
So I wonder if we could start with Gloria, you kicking us off by telling us a little bit about why you chose Wonder Woman for this cover.
Well, I had grown up with Wonder Woman. There were very few. She was almost the only female, cartoon superhero person. And I don't know if you remember this, but in the 50s and into the 60s, Wonder Woman had, like all women, fallen into terrible condition, right? It was all the conservatism after World War II and so on. She'd lost all her magical powers, no bracelets, no nothing. She looked like a car hop, So we decided we were going to rescue Wonder Woman because there were others, Joanne Edgar and others of us who had grown up with her. So we published her Golden Age strips when she really had all her magical powers in the magazine, quite a few pages of them. And we put her on the cover, as you can see, stopping war with one hand, distributing food with the other.
Yeah.
And we just campaigned our hearts out and asked our readers, to call DC Comics and tell them, and it went on and on and on. And finally, the Italian guy who supervised all the artists who I always imagined were chained by their ankles to the drawing board doing strips, right? He said, okay. He said, all right. They're on Paradise Island again with their where the goddess was retreated and the Wonder Woman came from. She has her magical bracelets back, her invisible plane, her magic lasso that makes people tell the truth. And she bounces, she has all her powers back. She has a costume back and everything. And she has a black Amazon sister named Nubia. Will you now leave me alone?
That's so great.
But you did it.
Right.
Well, and SVA is such a huge, rich, our history of working in comics, and so I was just talking today to one of our faculty who is drawing Wonder Woman now. So, yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, also, I had a job working for Harvey Kurtzman, if people remember Mad Magazine. Do you remember Mad Magazine? Yeah. Right. So I had some, acquaintance with the world of really sophisticated cartooning. Right.
Great. Well, and I love putting this image of your cover next to this work by Barbara, because this is, to me, it has such a nice relationship to that idea of envisioning a strong woman. And something that Barbara has said about her work is that key influences have been envisioning women's relationship to men, women's relationships to one another, but also women's relationship to the outside world. Right. And that doing these drawings helped you to envision and empower yourself because you could see what you felt you could be. Could you speak a little more about that time and this the Stargirl series, the Women Girl series?
The Stargirl series, actually there were three things. There was the first design store was called Scarabaeus, and George Bailarian was the head of it. He owned it. And he asked me to do 3 silk screens for him for the store to be sold. So 3 designs, and then they would just silk screen it. And I decided to do Stargirl, banded with Blue Wave, because I felt like I wanted to, show power to a woman. And then the other 2 ones that were abstract. So we did it. They sold really well. And one time a guy called me up and said, I love you. I didn't know who he was. He said, "Hi, this is Seymour Avigdor, and I have your star girl. And I have to tell you, she looks like the Mona Lisa to me, and I love her." I said, "Thank you, Seymour." And I said, "What do you do?" He said he was an interior designer, and we got to talking a little bit. But basically, Stargirl just happened. It just, I just wanted to do something. I didn't realize she looked like Wonder Woman until after I did it. And so I just went with it. And when he said that, it looked a little bit like the Mona Lisa. I looked at her, and she kind of have a smile that could be. You don't know if she's happy or whatever. So.
And then these are a few more images here that are from that series.
Pardon me?
The
and
girl.
these?
Yeah.
The woman girl. People call women girls all the time. And girls don't have pubic hair, and they're up to about 14, 13, 14. And after 14, you get your period, and you start growing hair in your vagina and under your arms and everything like that. And so I decided to do a woman girl series where you have full-grown women, but their vaginas are girls. So how can you show that without being, too out there? So I decided to, you can see it on this one, it doesn't have this one, have her on toe shoes, because being a woman is very precarious. Like, then, probably, maybe now, I don't know, but not for me right now. But in 1973, you had toe shoes, you had to be a ballet dancer. Works really, really, really hard to make it look so easy. And it's that kind of thing. Women working, and they go home and they make dinner, and but they have to make it look so easy. So that's the toe shoe part of it. And then you see the vagina on her, which is hairless, but it's not, out there. And the ribbons are the ones that, the gracefulness of how to make your life more graceful and still, be strong in your life. So that's kind of where this series was. So a woman, a girl, anybody over 14 who has their period is a woman. A young woman, a woman. A girl is somebody who doesn't have their period. So I decided the Women Girl series had to exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, the sense of precariousness is great. Don't you identify with that? That's, right. Nudity plus precarious on your toes, and so, right.
Well, as Barbara's talked about this series before and talked about empowering yourself by creating these images, I want to bring this back to Gloria, something that you said in your book, On the Road. You said, ordinary people are smart. Smart people are ordinary. Decisions are made by the people affected by them. And I'm wondering if you can share from your many years of travel and working with people how you've seen people empower themselves.
Well, when I started to go out and talk, I did it because I couldn't get published anything about the burgeoning, exciting women's movement, because editors who I'd been working with before would say to me, well, yes, we can publish a piece saying women are equal, but then we'll have to publish one right next to it saying they're not equal in order to be objective. It was just hopeless. Right? You can't make this stuff up. So at the same time, I was beginning to get some invitations to speak on campus. And so that's really how it all started. And because I had never spoken in public until then, and I was about 40, and I was terrified, and I could only do it with a speaking partner and everything, we always left at least as much time after the speech as the speech was. And in that way, I discovered that the magic of audiences, that if you just ask people to pretend, okay, you're looking at each other's backs. This is a hierarchical setting. Hierarchy is based on patriarchy. Patriarchy doesn't work anywhere anymore. Okay, but just pretend that you're sitting in a circle and you can see each other's faces, and just to, invite people to say to respond to something, to say what's going on in their community. It was like magic, absolutely magic. And I always knew it was working when somebody over there asked a question and somebody over there answered. I mean, the whole audience would acquire a life of its own. And I knew from India, that's when I really began to understand that what I learned in India was applicable here, which I didn't know before, because the talking circle is the source of all traditional decision making, actually in Native American communities too. It is here, but I didn't know that until I came home. Here on Mannahatta Island, it was also talking circles and concentric that were the means of government. So it was that kind of gradual discovery of how magical it is when we sit together. And now I would like to say I'm kind of obsessed with the fact that the average American now spends 11 hours a day looking at some kind of screen. And in that period of time, which is sort of from the late 80s forward, loneliness has skyrocketed, depression has skyrocketed, and suicide has skyrocketed. And if we're not together, we can't empathize, because the famous oxytocin, the tendon befriends hormone, isn't produced unless we're together. True of books too, much as I love books. If you're a page, we have to be together with all five senses. So I hope that just your being here, regardless of what we say, will lengthen your life.
I think that deserves some clap. I find it so reassuring to know that you felt nervous about and challenged by public speaking in your life, and that speaking with other women helped you to, be more confident. And I love that. I think it was Flo, one of your speaking partners, who encouraged you to not use statistics all of the time,
right,
but to use humor. Can you speak?
Yes. Who here remembers Flo Kennedy? Anybody? Oh, I see a few hands. I'm so glad. She was she was a civil rights lawyer, and she decided that the law was a one ass at a time proposition, and what you had to do was stop the ringer, okay? So she became an organizer, a media event, with an Aussie hat and right. African American. I mean, Google her, or she's great, totally great. So she was my speaking partner, and I, of course, being a journalist, I'm still there with my statistics and everything. And finally, she hauled me off and decided. She said, "Honey, if you are lying in a ditch with a truck on your ankle, you do not send someone to the library to find out how much the truck weighs. You get it, the fuck off."
That's great. I think also was there someone in your life who told you to, if you got nervous when you're presenting, to think of yourself as someone else, a famous woman?
Really?
Yes.
Yes, somebody did. Eleanor Roosevelt.
Yes, there you go.
Yes, because once I was on the old Tonight Show to talk about the farm workers or something, and I was in a snit of nerves, and she said, "Just pretend you're Eleanor Roosevelt. You're going someplace really important, and just on the way you have to do this silly little thing,
Yeah.
It does help to de-emphasize it, right?
Mm-hmm. And then, something I want to talk about, and we'll be taking questions from the audience soon. I just wanted to make sure I shared a little bit about the process that that Barbara specifically has used in creating her work over the years. Doing a sketchbook every day for over 50 years has been so essential to your work and process. And I wonder if you could speak about that a bit, and then I'm going to bring it back to Gloria.
Well, I do sketchbooks, and right now I'm on 101 sketchbook. But basically, I didn't know that I did sketchbooks. I just did them kind of compulsively, and I had a house in the country in 1974 before my house burned down, and I had just made my apartment in New York very zen, and I took everything I owned and put it in that house, and 2 months later, it burned down to the ground, and I lost my sketchbooks, and I felt like, oh my goodness, the only thing I really miss are my sketchbooks. So then I realized that, oh, I do sketchbooks, and that's an important thing. So now I got sketchbooks with good paper. Now this is like 15 years later. I didn't know that I did this. And so a lot of times your practice, when you're working, you have to kind of pay attention to yourself. You have to stand out here and kind of see what you're doing, because you don't know what you're doing when you're doing it, because you're just doing it. And I took the fire to make me understand that that was important in my life. And I think that also working as an illustrator and working as an artist, they're 2 very different things. So when I worked as an illustrator, I had to please a story, an art director, an editor, myself, and my audience. There were so many people I had to pay attention to and please. So when I work for myself, I don't want to please anyone. I just want to do it. I don't want to think about anything. So I believe that life is a balance, and everybody has their own balance, and I had to find my own balance, and that was it. If I had to do work for a magazine, I had this idea that I had to be with everybody in unison, and when I worked for myself, I didn't want to think about a thing. And that was another thing I discovered in my own work, as just working. Don't want to pay attention to my art. I only want to do it. And then when I'm an illustrator, I have to pay attention to everything. So I think that everybody has to find their own balance in life, whatever that is.
And I love that you mentioned before that you don't tear out pages, you don't censor yourself, you just keep everything in your sketchbook.
Oh, I don't throw out I don't tear out a page in my sketchbook. And I don't really, if I don't like it, too bad. It's in my sketchbook, I did it, I have to look at it. And whether I like it or not, it's not part of the process. And I have rules, not allowed to tear out a page. But the funny thing is that maybe 6 months or something, I look back at my sketchbook and I go, oh, I like that. I wonder why I didn't like that. Oh, yeah, I didn't like that. I'm so glad I kept it. So that's another thing. I think when you're in the heat of working and you're doing something you really don't like, it's kind of something that is unfamiliar, and so you don't really like it that much, but it's maybe a turning point, and you have lots of those along the way.
And I love thinking about like that you've been like doing this documentation like constantly for all these years. You've been doing all this documentation and sketching every day for all these years. And I'm bringing this back over to Gloria because I read that you've said that you regret that you didn't keep a daily diary in your early career.
No, I've never been able to do that, and I don't know whether this relates back to what I was saying about Milton Glaser, that artists, visual artists, enjoy the process and and writers don't. I don't know what it is. I mean, maybe because I was a journalist, I needed a deadline, I needed the terror, of having to write. I don't think it's peculiar to all, it can't be peculiar to all writers, because many writers have famously kept diaries, and Alice Walker, my hero, Alice Walker, she keeps a diary every day, and so I don't know, but as Barbara says, we are who we are, So I just kind of have to face the fact that I make little scribbled notes. I don't keep a diary. I need a deadline. I need to fall in love with an idea, or an emergency or something to get me to write.
And then one of the last things I'd like to talk about before we open this up is what you're working on now and what you have coming up. So Barbara, do you have an exhibition coming up soon?
Yeah, I have an exhibition coming up. It opens September 5th to October 5th at a place called Pen and Brush in New York. It's 29 East 22nd Street. And I'm looking forward to that in 2019. And I'm working every day in my studio and in my sketchbooks.
Yes, yes. And Gloria, I know you have there's a couple of films coming out soon, but I specifically am really curious about the play that you have coming up. It has a very unusual structure. Can you tell us a bit about that two-act play?
Yeah, well, the origin really is, you know, Kathy Najimy is an actress and a writer and a producer and wonderful. Okay, she's a dear friend, and she kept saying to me that I should do a one-woman show of my life. I said, oh yeah. So anyway, so then she went to see Daryl Roth, who's a wonderful Broadway producer, and you know, has done many shows, and to my surprise, she says she thought it was a good idea too, right? So she assigned a writer, and we actually did a workshop, you know, for a couple of days, and I realized no way could I do that. I mean, I can get up and talk because, you know, but the idea that I would have to meet cues and do the same thing every night so I sat them down because I felt bad because they had spent some money on this, and I said, I don't know how to say this to you, but I just cannot do it, right? So they said, okay, fine, we'll get somebody else to do it. So Christine Lottie, the great Christine Lottie, who's a friend and a wonderful actor, great, is playing me, and it's at one of the Daryl Roth Theater, and the first act is my life, you know, the kind of arc of things that they've turned into a play, and just in time, I feel, because I'm losing my memory, so I'll be able to go to this play
and to remember.
And I asked them if Act 2 could be a talking circle, not a talk back to the play, but a talking circle. And Daryl's theater is wonderful for that because it's not exactly circular, but it's oval. And we've put cushions and chairs and things, and you know, so once again, you know, I feel we'll take people away from their screens, and but people will be able to say whatever they want, tell their own stories, and I'm very excited by that. And when I am not there, I can't be there all the time for the talking circle, I'll be there sometimes, but all kinds of wonderful organizers and great people are coming to spark the talking circle.
That's great. And then one other project I would love for you to speak about is the Lipstick Lobby social justice lipstick product and your special project called the Unprison Project. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us about
Yes,
that?
the Lipstick Lobby is devoted to, you know, different shades of lipstick with different names and so on, to giving 100% of their profits to programs for women in prison. And they asked different people to name the different shades. And since I mean, I have nothing against lipstick, but I look like I'm a 1930s person, so I wear lip gloss, so I named it In the Clear. And Deborah Jang Stein, a wonderful woman, who herself was born in prison and then adopted and so on. And she is just the most inventive, generous, effective person who is running programs, especially bringing books into prisons where children's books, for instance, so that when mothers are visited by their kids, they have something to talk about that isn't behind prison walls. And also it increases literacy enormously, and as we know, illiteracy is the major determinant of who goes to prison and who doesn't. It really doesn't have to do with anything else. So it's a wonderful project. You can find it online. You know, buy all your lipstick there.
And speaking of which, we have a table over here, and after today's lecture,
yes, right.
You can buy it right here.
Tonight, right.
So, yeah, so please do. Yeah. And now we have a few moments for questions from the audience. We have mics on either on either side of the theater here. So just raise your hand if you have a question. I see one right.
Or an answer. We
Oh.
could use answers.
Okay.
Is it on? Hi there. Thank you so much for being here today and sharing your wisdom with us. I'm right here in the front.
Oh, thank you for waving. I'm looking.
Oh, you're welcome. I wanted to ask you about self-doubt and if that has played a role in like silencing it or learning to live with it, if that's played a role in your career, and any advice you have for some who may be
No, of
dealing with
course.
that.
I mean, it hasn't. It's played a role in all of our lives, probably, and I suspect women more than men, or people of color more than white folks, or something. You know, because we absorb. I mean, it isn't just that the patriarchy is out there; it's in us. You know, it isn't just that racism is out there; it's in us. So it takes away our confidence. And one thing I think is to make sure that you have friends, colleagues who encourage you. You know, we can encourage each other when we can't encourage ourselves. And that's what consciousness raising groups are about, or, you know, whatever you want to call them. But to make sure that you have, however diverse the group is, you have people who laugh at the same jokes and encourage you and say, do that. And, you know, it really makes a huge, huge difference. And other than that, I would just say there's one thing worse than failing. It's not trying. Because then you walk around for days thinking, what if?
Yeah.
What if I said that? What if? So why not say it? You know, give it a try.
Hi, you can hear me, everyone. It's Lori Sokol. Hi, both of you.
Oh, hi.
How are you? Hi, Barbara. Gloria. Okay. I wanted to ask if both of you being artists, one, of course, as an illustrator, and of course, Gloria as a writer, today, what we're experiencing today in this country, and the patriarchy becoming more extreme, as and women are now standing up more, and it's every day something's different, and we're experiencing protests and more women running for office, and will hopefully get elected and so forth. How each of you can use your work and your experience and your expertise to teach women as well as men who want to seek equality of women and men who are allies. How you can use your talents, your artwork, your writing, Gloria, to make more of a difference, because certainly this country needs a lot more.
Tell us what we should watch on television. I mean, online first.
Tell us
what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Okay. I am executive director of Women's E-News, which is a global women's news organization. And
you should definitely, it's a wonderful, wonderful
thank you.
website.
Thank
should go.
you.
Yeah, right.
And with all of the questions about journalism and what is truth and what is not truth, clearly, and Gloria and I discussed this a couple of months ago, the importance of, certainly if it's a nonprofit organization, news organization, we don't have to answer to anybody, right? And Women's E-News is one of them. So thank you for this, 1-minute commercial. I appreciate it. But if we can go back to the two of you, what do you feel you can do through your work now to mobilize more women and their male allies to stop what's happening in this country in terms of patriarchy becoming more and more extreme?
Well, I think first of all, we all do what we see more than what we're told. So the power of our example is the most powerful thing that we have. Secondly, I think we spend too much time looking up. And when we look at each other, we see what we can do, actually. And also, I would get rid of the shoulds. What should I do? And just say, I'm going to do everything I can. Everything I fucking well can. I'm going to do it, right? Big, small, whatever it is. I'm just going to do it every day because we live in the present. And as terrible as, we don't know whether we can survive the crisis of having a crazy man in the White House, which is what we have. It's very scary. And we don't know whether we can survive the crisis of having something like a third of the country that wants to go back to the old racist, sexist hierarchy of the past. It's not the majority, and it wasn't the majority in the election, but for a series of crazy reasons, but we also, I am at the same time, because now we see everything illustrated at a high level. In my opinion, everything that's wrong with the country we can see illustrated at a high level. It has activated people. We are woke. I mean, we are seriously woke now. And there are so many more people who didn't vote are now running for office. People who, had never gone to a demonstration. I mean, I just got a call or an email this morning from a friend who's even older than I, which is saying something. And she was informing me that at 1 o'clock, everybody was supposed to be dressed in black out in front of this. I mean, demonstrations. Yes. So, I mean, the bad news is that we know what the bad news is. But the good news is that we are awake now in a way that I've never, ever seen in my life.
Yeah, I agree with that. And basically be positive, because there's so much negativity around, and your positivity, my positivity, will be reflected in everyone you meet. So, we do have a crazy person in the White House, and I can't even believe it. But I just want to be positive and be positive to everyone around me.
Another question? Yeah.
Hello, my name's Hannah. I'm a master's student here at SVA. So I'm doing my thesis on team building America, and talking circles seem like such a wonderful way to bring people together and hold space for people to be together and speak to each other. I'm wondering how you get people in the room in the first place.
Well, they start in lots of different ways. People you work with, neighbors, women and men who have kids who go to school together. But I would say just follow your instinct, just invite people who, I mean, diversity helps because then you learn more from each other. So just start with 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, and they'll invite their friends, come and, have lunch or meet after work. There's no magic to it. It's just meeting to tell your current story and listen to other people's stories. Actually, in the Native American way, there's a talking stick which you pass around the circle so that when that person is holding it, they get to talk, and then because the whole point is that everybody speaks and everybody listens. But if you just have faith in it, you don't know what's going to happen. But if you have faith in it, we've been doing this for hundreds of thousands of years. It's in our cellular memory, sitting around a campfire, telling our stories. It's how we learn. It's how our brains developed. Just have faith in it, and see what happens.
Thank you.
Hi. So we actually have a nonprofit that wants to foster commitment in young people to fight for gender equality and prove that age doesn't determine the change that any individual can affect. And so we were just wondering how you would encourage young people, specifically kids and teens, to fight for gender equality and to not think that they're too young or inexperienced?
No, you're definitely not too young. Are you kidding me? I mean, I saved these letters, this little, like 6-year-old girl's writing me with the crayon, the boys get the good parts of the playground. We are supposed to play. We girls are angry as turnips. I never forgot that. I thought that kid is going to be a writer. Turnips. Right. Actually, I think there are many ways in which the younger you are, the wiser you are, because kids all over the world in different languages say something like, "It is not fair, and you are not the boss of me," right? And those two things are the basis of everything, Just of that kind of equality. So I would not say to you what you should do. I would just say, do what you know needs doing, and ask us for help to support you, because we should be supporting you.
So can you help us?
I'm sure that we'll get together.
Great.
I wanted to ask what your favorite personal technique for keeping it positive is, especially when you're feeling really angry.
Well, once again, I think it is not being by yourself, but being with people who, however different we are, share hopes and laugh at the same jokes and so on. I mean, I think that is the single most important thing. I mean, there's a reason why solitary confinement is torture. I mean, we are communal animals. We need that. And when you're feeling despair, if you just get together and share your thoughts, you already will feel better. Your serotonin and your, and you will begin to have ideas of what you could actually do.
Barbara, the question was about how you stay positive. Yeah. Do you want to address that? How do you stay positive in this environment?
I just try and look at the bright side, because for this minute that I'm living my life, I could be not happy or I can be happy. But this minute will not come again. So I try and be positive and happy, because I know that it's not going to come again and I can't live it again. That's how I stay positive.
Yeah, staying present in the moment.
Yeah. I mean, of course, there are times when you feel sad, because that's life. But I try and be as positive as I can, and look for the good part in people and in whatever. Even if something negative happens, I try and see, okay, where's the good part in this? Did I learn something? I hope I did.
Yeah, when bad things happen, if you say, what can I learn from this?
Right.
It helps.
There's a question over there.
Hi.
And could you talk
Louder?
Yeah.
I was just wondering, because I think, Gloria, you had said that, the patriarchy is in us, or racism is in us, and thinking about, as someone who's about to have a boy, how, what would you recommend in terms of, you can do all these things, like I have a nephew who's the greatest thing in the world, but what do you recommend in terms of what you can do as a parent or teacher to sort of fight against that, other than, living in New York is probably a start, and being in this bubble. But, I just think about that. It's like, what causes
the very
this switch?
fact that you're thinking about it will have, because there are all these studies that show that both parents, if a boy baby cries, they're less likely to pick them up than a girl baby, because you're supposed to toughen up boys and say, hello, No. I mean, it's if we just I mean, gender, we invented gender.
Yeah.
Like we invented race, and it's cultural and it's deep, but we can disinvent them. So, you know, looking at your son as a human being and not as a different kind of human being will make all the difference, because there's a unique person in there who could never have happened before and could never happen again. There's, you know, Freud, who was an asshole of enormous power, tried to convince mothers to distance themselves from their sons. Heaven forfend they would become gay or so. I don't know what there was a whole thing. So, and I think that mothers absorbed the idea in the culture that they were not supposed to be too close to their son. Somehow they would make them too sensitive, sissies or whatever. So they ended up kind of abandoning the person who probably, given the fact that fathers were not fathering equally, which they should be, the person who was the closest to that boy distanced herself, and that kid never trusted another woman, you know, because that had been so painful for him. So if we just stay connected, you know, it works.
Thank you.
And your son is lucky.
Hi. As newspapers and magazines
Could you speak
disappear,
louder, if I can?
as newspapers and magazines disappear, where do you think the future artists will be able to show their work besides galleries? I'm just curious.
Mm-hmm.
As you, Barbara, where would you go today?
Well, the one thing is that there's a lot of things out there like Instagram and a lot of visual platforms on the computer where you can show your work. I think the gallery system is weird. I don't think that it really works anymore. You know, 5 people walk into a gallery and see, it just doesn't have the power that something like the computer has. But I don't know. I think that's one of the reasons I like to do illustration, because it wasn't for just myself, it was for a lot of people, and that's what they saw. And I tried to make my illustrations as powerful as I could. But that was when magazines were really magazines. Now there's really not the kind of illustration that there was before. So the whole, because there's digital communication and there's, you know, the internet, there's opportunity there. But it hasn't, in my opinion, it hasn't developed to the point where we really understand it the way we should understand it. And I don't know if I'm going to live long enough to know that or what's going to happen, but we're still discovering how we could communicate visually with other people and even storytelling in any way. But I think that the internet has a possibility of disseminating your work. Or, you know, I know sometimes something will pop up and say, you should look at this on Instagram or something. Okay, I'll look at it and see what it is. And sometimes I'm surprised that, oh, this is pretty good. I really like this. So, but I think the gallery system is not really, I don't see even how it lasts.
Do you think there's, I mean, obviously this is not but I wonder if there isn't some hope in thinking of the way it used to be, because from living with you, I know that everything you do is how she arranges everything, it's right. And what traditionally is in our time, what is called art has been what white guys did in a European tradition for the most part, right? And crafts was what women and natives did, but actually it was all the same stuff, really. So if we can maybe enlarge our view and look at everything we do and touch and surround ourselves with as potential art and potential visual lessons, pleasing, shocking, whatever it is, then it will democratize art. Of course, I want you all to be able to make a living too, don't misunderstand me.
I think we have time for one more question from the audience.
Looks like it's going to be me. Thank you very much. I just wanted to check in, I guess mostly with you, Gloria, about where you think the patriarchy is, because in some ways, to me, it's a very confusing picture. You know, for some reason, I've been thinking about Dorothy Dinnerstein's book and
yes, I love
her predictions about how the patriarchy would lead us to nuclear war, and that the solution is the changing of gender roles along the lines of what you were talking about a few minutes ago. And in some ways, that has happened. We have had gender being deconstructed. We have, identity being deconstructed. Yet we have what's going on politically. And I find it very confusing. I mean, do you think it's a backlash? Do you think it's?
No, I mean, I think, don't you? I mean, because the majority, there's a majority change in sensibility. Because of all the social justice movements and the artists, you know, it's now a majority, and something like a third of the country that is in revolt against it is a backlash, and it's very dangerous. But I think we understand now, at least we're beginning to understand, that hierarchy, patriarchy, whatever you want to call it, starts by controlling reproduction, which means controlling women's bodies. If we didn't have wombs, we'd be fine. And then racism or caste in India or whatever makes it even more important to control women's bodies, to keep this race separate from that race and this caste. So the more we can democratize ourselves, so the basis of democracy should be that we control our own bodies. The power of the government stops at our skin. By that measure, you know, we have very few women have lived in a democracy. So the more we fight for control of men too, for control of our own bodies and our own selves, and the more we remember that without democratic families, we're never going to have a democracy. If you learn hierarchy in your own house, it's much harder to get it out of your head later on. The biggest indicator of whether a country will go to war or not with another country, or be violent within its own streets and so on, is not poverty, it's not access to natural resources, it's not religion, it is violence against females. Because you see that first, you come to think one group is born to dominate the other. That's all about controlling reproduction and patriarchy. So it's connected, and it's connected, and it changes in a connected way. And it is changing in a connected way. And we do have a backlash. But for the first time in my life, women are being believed in the Me Too and Time's Up and all of that. We've done a not good job of thinking about racism in this country. I've never been to Germany, but I think they've done a better job of talking about the Holocaust and, you know, what happened, because kids learn in the classroom in a real way. And I don't think we really learn about slavery and the results of slavery in the same way. But, you know, it becomes less scary and feeling like you can do nothing about it when you realize that just taking control of your own body, just dissolving the hierarchy where you are, just having everybody in the office tell each other how much they make. It's the one thing we know, you know, we could find out what's unfair. I don't know. Just doing it in daily life, then it's like throwing a pebble in a pond and the circles go out and out and out and out.
Well, I want to, that's a very interesting and strong note to end on, but I want to say thank you for your example, your strong friendship, and also the example of your work. And thank you for spending time with us today at SVA. I'd like to give the audience also a round of applause for joining us. Thank you.
Okay, can I say one other thing?
Yes.
Before you leave, if you feel like it, you don't have to do anything I say, but if you feel like but introduce yourselves. If you came here, you care about a lot of the same things, right? Probably. So look around, see 3 or 4 people you don't know. Introduce yourselves, say what you're doing, and you may leave here with a new friend, a new revolutionary colleague, a new love affair. I don't know. But we will have something more of personal connections than before.
I have an idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can talk to each other right now, and we'll do 5 minutes.
Okay.
Right now. We have 5 minutes. Talk to the next person.
Oh, that's right.
That's ours. Yeah.
That's a good idea. Right. That's a good idea.
Does that work?
Thank you,
That's
ladies.
very smart, Barbara.
Yeah, yeah.
Have to give people time to do it.
Uh-huh.
Hi. How are you? We'll talk.
It's a nice buzz.
We'll talk.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah.
Hi. Yeah, I do.
Does Milton teach anymore? No.
He's involved in the school. I don't know that he teaches on a regular basis, but he's very directly involved in overseeing a kind of incubator space. So where like some young talent are developing their own products and businesses. So, and I think it's actually in his same studio building. So he does his own work and then comes and gets involved in that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I went to a graduation not long